When we look in period text and we see rich people food and we see poor people food, they are seemingly miles apart. And in a lot of ways, they could not be more different. When you look at the food that comes to a rich person's table, the presentation, the process, there's a table placement in the beginning of a lot of these cookbooks that says these dishes go here, this dish goes here, silverware goes here. And there's a process and how all that movement takes place. You know that a poor person, not on their best day, is ever going to experience anything like that. Now, we are going to talk about poor people and poor people food in this episode, but we've already done that at length on this channel. Let's focus real quick on the rich person. Rich people in the time period had responsibilities that poor people did not have, or at least they thought they did. There was something about looking the part, acting the part, that mattered very much to them, and they felt like it was their responsibility, especially in the new world, to have that appearance because they wanted to seem on par with the places that they had come from. People over in Europe are saying, nah, that it's a new place, it's the wild, it's going to be a bad situation. And they felt it was their responsibility to dispel those rumors and those beliefs. One of the things that I thought was most strange and impressive when I went to George Washington's Mount Vernon was that he didn't have a stone house, but he had painted it to look like a stone house because that was the expectation. So some of those responsibilities made the dinner table one of the most important things in their lives because business is done over the dinner table. Bonds are formed over the dinner table. Relationships are progressed. And that is what rich people needed in society. They needed people in high places to be on their side. So the table at a rich person's house needed to be impressive. It needed to have a wow factor. We might even think about things that we say now when it comes to food like, oh, the presentation is beautiful, you eat with your eyes first. That's very true, and they knew that back then. And so when you go to a rich person's house, food is impressive, it's beautiful, it's plentiful, and it's going to take a long time to consume it because it's about the conversation and the event. Now, it is easy for us to look at this situation and say, oh, that poor rich person, they have to entertain guests. What a hard life. But let's say that this is something that you're born into, something that you didn't ask for. Benjamin Franklin even said that guests, like fish, begin to smell after 3 days. And in his autobiography, he laments sometimes about the fact that he has to entertain or the fact that he has to do different things in high society that he's not drawn to. He's a person that likes to think and invent, and he does like conversation, and he does like meeting with important people. But it doesn't mean that he always wants to. It's a responsibility. It's an obligation. So just like with rich people, food is, in a way, it's a tool, right? They're using it in the way that they best know how to make their situation better, and that is entertainment, entertaining people. With poor people, food is also a tool. It's for sustenance. It's for survival. And depending on whether you are just a poor beggar, there's that, and you need sustenance in that situation. If you're a laborer, you need fuel. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that fuel looks like. In William Ellis's book, A Country Housewife's Family Companion, he talks about farmers, he talks about laborers, and he talks about their diets. And they're raising crop, they're raising livestock. He's saying, use this then, use this at a different time in the season, right? And he is kind of laying all that out for us. But mainly what these laborers are eating are grains, vegetables, fruits made into puddings and pasties and different things like that. That's what they're concerned with. As you're reading through these period cookbooks, you start to realize rich people and poor people oftentimes are eating the same thing. Now, when it comes to something like meat, they're eating different cuts, but it's the same animal. And when it comes to something like vegetables, oftentimes they're eating the same vegetables, it's just prepared in a different way. And it's thought of in a different ways. So if we take asparagus, for example, that is a really strange sort of vegetable that you'll oftentimes find growing in the wild. In fact, I was just talking to John about this recipe, and he gave me the story about how when he was little, when his mom was driving in the country and she saw asparagus growing somewhere, she would just stop and snip it real quick, take it home and cook it. So poor people could certainly do that. They can have wild asparagus. And when it's in season, that's great. But rich people could have it anytime they want it. They can order things from greenhouses. They have the funds to support that. They can even say, for this dish and the wow factor, I want white or purple asparagus. They have the advantage of being picky about what they want. The poor person is taking what they can get. I've got two recipes today that are using the same main ingredient, and we're gonna make them both. We're gonna look at them and say, what makes this one rich? What makes this one poor? And we're gonna taste them against each other. So the first one comes out of Primitive Cookery, and that was from 1767. And this is an interesting and wonderful little cookbook. It was made so that people that are not of means can have really great food. In the back, it kind of goes through and it lists a bunch of different recipes that have minimal ingredients that you can just whip up. It says asparagus with butter and salt, eaten with bread, purges by urine, and affords good nutriment. It's that simple. We're gonna throw some asparagus in the skillet with butter, have a piece of bread, and see how that tastes. Now the second recipe is a little bit more elaborate. It comes from The Art of Cookery, which was written in 1774. So less than 10 years between these two recipes. So we know that the classes are still very similar. We're comparing apples to apples here. All right, here's the recipe. It's called asparagus forced in French rolls. Take 3 French rolls, take out all the crumb, but first cutting a piece of the top crust off. But be careful that the crust fits again in the same place. Fry the rolls brown in fresh butter, then take a pint of cream, the yolks of 6 eggs beat fine, a little salt and nutmeg. Stir them well together over slow fire till it begins to be thick. Have ready 100 of small grass boiled, then save tops enough to stick the rolls with. The rest cut small and put into the cream. Fill the loaves with them. Before you fry the rolls, make holes thick in the top of the crust. Then lay on the piece of crust and stick the grass in. Then it may look as if it were growing. It makes a pretty side dish for a second course. So this dish is all about presentation. So, okay, we're gonna take this loaf of bread and we're gonna fill it and we're going to brown it up, and we're also going to make it look like there are little asparagus that are growing up through it. It's very whimsical. When it comes to the table, it's like, whoa, what's going on here? And if we've got breadcrumbs here letting us know that this is a rich dish. Number one, it's got nutmeg. Nutmeg is not a cheap ingredient, and it's not something that just everybody has, although they want it. And it is popular in some lower dishes. But that is when people want to feel like, oh, we've got something special here. Number 2, we've got eggs and cream as opposed to just butter. Number 3, it says right here at the end of the recipe, this is a pretty side dish at a second course. There's so much food. This is just a piece of the meal. And the poor one, it's the whole meal. That's all you get. For our wealthy asparagus dish, what we're going to do is take our asparagus and cut off the ends that are in the ground, and then we're going to boil it. And it won't take long to boil, depending on how brisk it is. You just want it to be to the consistency that you like to eat it at. After that, we are going to take our French roll and we're going to take an angle and we're going to cut into the crust. But we want to make sure that this crust piece that we cut out is going to fit back over the top like a coffin. We basically have walls, a top, and an empty interior. Then we're going to prepare our custard, and we're going to cut this recipe down from what they call for, because we only need 1 French loaf. So we're going to take 3 eggs and a cup of cream. We're going to mix that together with some salt and some nutmeg. Put that over the fire. We're going to cook this slowly. We just want it to thicken up. We do not want to cook the eggs. You want to keep 4 or 5 pieces of the top of the stalks that are a bit longer, because that's for our presentation. After we get that mixed up with the custard, we're going to put that inside, and then the top we're going to cut little bits out so that we can stick the asparagus stalks down in there. When that's all done, you put the top back on, and it's completely sealed up as a loaf of bread with asparagus growing out of it. This is what makes me tick about researching these historical recipes. It's one thing, and it is fun to just kind of go through and say, oh, that's an interesting recipe. I want to try that, and I want to taste what they were tasting. It's something completely different, and it's even more fun when you're reading in between the lines culturally, and you're saying, okay, so who was eating what, and why were they doing it, and what mattered about this presentation versus this non-presentation, and seeing where all that fits into society. That stuff I can really just go deep on, and this has been a really fun recipe to research. For our tasting, let's start with the lowly asparagus and work our way up. And I'm guessing, if you've had asparagus before, that's what this is. Right? And thankfully, asparagus is one of my favorite things to eat. The butter is nice. It brings in some richness there. Let's see what this tastes like. So this one actually doesn't have butter, except for on the outside of the bread. But it has this rich custard. Yeah. The rich one it's fun. It's different. It's got more going on. I'd be happy eating either one. But they're both delicious. Obviously, the cream and the eggs in this one makes it more rich. So again, this is a side dish over here. This is a main course. They've gone out of their way to wow you. I mean, look at this presentation. I've never made anything and cared that much about what it looks like. You've got a beautiful plate to put it on as well, but it looks like what they said. Asparagus is growing out of it, and it brings a wow factor up to the table along with it.